There's something deeply unsettling about the way humanity talks about sex. People speak about it as liberation, as self-expression, as empowerment, as pleasure, as romance, as intimacy, as freedom. But if sex truly liberated people, modern society would not look spiritually devastated. Because never in human history have people had this much access to pleasure. And never in human history have people looked this emotionally empty. Look around carefully. People can no longer stay alone with themselves for 5 minutes without opening an app, chasing attention, fantasizing about someone, consuming stimulation, or needing validation from strangers. Desire is no longer part of life. It became the center of human psychology. And maybe that's not accidental, because sex has always been more than biology. At its deepest level, sex is intertwined with something darker, the human fear of incompleteness. Most people don't actually crave bodies. They crave interruption. Interruption of loneliness, interruption of anxiety, interruption of silence, interruption of self-awareness, interruption of the terrifying realization that existence itself feels unfinished. That's why lust can feel almost mystical. For a few moments, the individual disappears, the mind weakens, the burden of identity dissolves, time becomes blurry, thought vanishes, pain becomes distant, and people call that pleasure. But maybe what they're truly experiencing is temporary escape from consciousness itself, because afterwards something strange always returns. The emptiness, always the emptiness, no matter how intense the experience was, no matter how beautiful the person was, no matter how much desire existed beforehand, the mind returns to itself, and suddenly the individual feels the same internal hunger all over again. So they search for another person, another night, another fantasy, another emotional intoxication, not realizing they are trapped inside a cycle that cannot end through satisfaction. Because desire doesn't end when fed, it evolves. Ancient civilizations worshipped gods made of stone. Modern civilization worships stimulation. Everything today revolves around desirability. The way people dress, the way they speak, the body they build, the photos they post, the surgeries they undergo, the status they chase, the confidence they fake. Almost everyone is performing. And beneath that performance exists one silent obsession. Am I desirable enough to be loved? This is the tragedy nobody wants to admit. Modern identity is heavily constructed around sexual validation. People don't just want connection anymore. They want proof of worth. And sex became the fastest way to momentarily feel valuable. That's why rejection destroys people so deeply. Because rejection today is no longer interpreted as incompatibility. The modern mind interprets it as existential failure. Not attractive enough, not beautiful enough, not masculine enough, not feminine enough, not enough. So people begin reshaping themselves endlessly. The gym, the makeup, the surgeries, the filters, the personality masks, the seductive performances on social media. A civilization obsessed with being desired slowly loses contact with what it actually is. And maybe this is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves. Because they no longer live naturally, they live theatrically. Always observed, always performing, always seducing, always comparing. Even love became contaminated by spectacle. People no longer ask, can this person understand my soul? They ask, can this person validate my ego? And that changes everything. The human brain was never designed for infinite sexual stimulation. Never. For most of history, desire had friction, distance, waiting, mystery, uncertainty. Now there are millions of bodies available instantly through a screen. Infinite novelty, infinite fantasy, infinite dopamine, and the brain adapts to it catastrophically fast. Pornography doesn't simply create addiction, It rewires perception itself. Real intimacy becomes slower, weaker, less stimulating. Reality cannot compete with endless artificial novelty. This is why so many people today feel emotionally numb during actual human connection. Their nervous system has been trained to crave intensity rather than intimacy. And this creates something terrifying. People begin consuming human beings the same way they consume products. Swipe, click, discard, repeat. Bodies become content. Desire becomes algorithmic. Attraction becomes industrialized. And somewhere inside this process, something sacred collapses. Because when another human being becomes reduced to stimulation, empathy begins dying silently. The modern world pretends this has no spiritual consequence. But look carefully at society. People are more sexually exposed than ever. Yet intimacy terrifies them. People fear commitment, fear vulnerability, fear emotional depth, fear stillness, fear attachment. Because stimulation without meaning eventually fragments the psyche. The soul becomes overstimulated and undernourished simultaneously. A person drowning in endless desire slowly loses the ability to feel wonder. Everything becomes consumption, even human beings. Lust carries a hidden sadness that almost nobody talks about. Because underneath sexual desire exists a deeper impossibility. No one can truly reach another consciousness. No matter how intense intimacy becomes, each person remains trapped inside their own mind. And maybe this is why sex can feel strangely melancholic afterward. For a brief moment, people feel close to transcendence, close to union, close to dissolving separation itself. Then reality returns. Two people lying beside each other. Silence. Distance. The ordinary weight of existence reappears, and many feel an unexplainable sadness afterward. Not guilt, something deeper. The realization that no physical experience can permanently resolve existential loneliness. Bodies touch. Consciousness remains isolated. This is why many people become addicted to romantic obsession itself. Not because they found love, because they are chasing dissolution of inner emptiness. But emptiness cannot be cured through another human being. That burden is too heavy for any person to carry. And modern relationships collapse precisely because people expect salvation from imperfect humans. They expect another person to eliminate insecurity, loneliness, fear, confusion, purposelessness. Impossible expectations. No relationship survives being turned into a substitute for spiritual meaning. Eventually, reality destroys the fantasy. Beauty fades, novelty fades, excitement fades, hormones stabilize, idealization collapses. And beneath all of it, two frightened human beings remain. Still incomplete, still mortal, still confused, still searching. Previous generations escaped through religion. Modern generations escape through stimulation. The mechanism changed. The hunger didn't. People today are constantly overstimulated because silence became unbearable. The moment distraction disappears, something uncomfortable emerges. The individual finally meets themselves, and most people are strangers to themselves. That's why they keep running. More entertainment, more sex, more fantasy, more scrolling, more attention, more emotional chaos. Anything to avoid direct contact with existence, because existence without distraction can feel horrifying. You suddenly notice time passing, your mortality, your confusion, your emotional wounds, your dependency, your loneliness. Sex is extremely effective at temporarily silencing all of this. That's why society became obsessed with it. Not because humanity became freer, because humanity became more psychologically incapable of confronting reality soberly. The modern person calls this liberation, while being emotionally dependent on constant stimulation to remain functional. That isn't freedom, that's sedation. There's a reason celibacy unsettles modern people so deeply. Because celibacy forces confrontation. Without constant pursuit, fantasy, romance, stimulation, pornography, flirting, validation, emotional drama, something buried begins surfacing. The self. And for many people, the self is unbearable. Not because humans are evil, because most people spent their entire lives distracting themselves from their own consciousness. Celibacy removes one of the strongest anesthetics available. Suddenly the mind becomes louder. Loneliness appears fully. Restlessness appears fully. Emptiness appears fully. Fear appears fully. And this is where many break, because they realize their entire psychological structure depended on external stimulation. But some people discover something else beyond this phase. Clarity. Energy returns. Attention sharpens. Perception deepens. Emotional dependency weakens. The individual slowly stops organizing existence around being desired. And that changes consciousness profoundly. For the first time, they begin seeing how much of society operates through manipulation of desire. Advertising, entertainment, politics, social media, fashion, algorithms, everything constantly provoking insecurity and lust because distracted people are easier to control. A human being addicted to stimulation remains psychologically weak. A human being capable of inner stillness becomes dangerous to systems built on dependency. The darkest truth about sex is not that it is sinful. The darkest truth is that many people use it to avoid confronting existence. That's why endless pleasure never produces peace. Because pleasure was never designed to answer metaphysical suffering. No body can save someone from mortality. No orgasm can remove existential fear. No relationship can permanently silence inner emptiness. The modern world keeps promising that the next experience will finally complete you. It never does. Because the void people are trying to fill is not physical, it is spiritual. And modern civilization abandoned spirituality while keeping the hunger for transcendence alive. So now people search for transcendence inside bodies, inside pleasure, inside stimulation, inside romance, inside obsession. But transcendence and distraction are not the same thing. Distraction postpones suffering. Transcendence transforms it. And maybe this is why modern people look so psychologically fragmented, despite endless access to pleasure. They keep trying to cure existential emptiness with biological stimulation, trying to heal the soul through chemistry, trying to escape consciousness without understanding it. But eventually everyone reaches the same terrifying realization. No pleasure can save a human being from being human. And maybe maturity begins exactly there. The moment someone stops asking desire to rescue them from existence itself. If this video resonated with you, maybe it's because deep down you already sensed that something in modern life feels profoundly wrong. People are surrounded by stimulation, yet emotionally empty, constantly connected, yet internally isolated, obsessed with pleasure, yet spiritually exhausted. And the truth is, conversations like these are becoming increasingly rare. Because most content today exists only to distract you, to keep your mind noisy, to keep you consuming endlessly without ever questioning the machinery around you. This channel was created for the opposite reason, to slow things down, to confront uncomfortable truths, to explore the darker corners of human existence that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And if you've stayed until this point, you're already part of that. Just watching the videos helps more than you imagine. Liking, sharing, commenting, sending the video to someone who needs it. All of that genuinely keeps the channel alive. Really. In a world built on shallow content and fast dopamine, your attention already means a lot. But if you want to go deeper, you can become a channel member. There are already more than 100 exclusive videos available for members. Videos that go further into philosophy, psychology, nihilism, spirituality, human behavior, emotional suffering, modern emptiness, and the hidden mechanisms shaping society and consciousness. It's a way to support the channel directly while gaining access to content that YouTube's algorithm rarely recommends openly. And if this video impacted you in some way, you can also use the Super Thanks feature. Not as charity, not as obligation, but as a form of reciprocity. Because when someone helps us understand ourselves a little more clearly, there's something human about wanting to help keep that voice alive, especially today, when authenticity is disappearing, when depth is disappearing, when almost everything is becoming performance, noise, and distraction. Either way, thank you for being here. Seriously. Among millions of people endlessly scrolling through meaningless stimulation, you chose to stop for a moment and reflect. And maybe that already says something important about who you are becoming.